My camping horror story with scouts. A true Reddit story. The biting chill of the October air seeped into my bones as I reluctantly set up the main tent. Camping. I hated it. But as a leader, I had to suck it up and pretend I was having a good time. At least I had my laptop. Some late-night work would be my escape from this forced wilderness immersion. My friend Anthony, the other leader on this doomed expedition, approached, and we shared a few strange jokes, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling of dread that seemed to hang in the air. That's when I saw it. A fleeting gray blur, like a wisp of smoke given life, darted across the edge of the clearing. Anthony saw it too. We exchanged a worried look, but with the scouts arriving, we brushed it off and focused on getting everyone settled. After laying down the rules of survival camp, no wandering off alone, no eating poisonous berries, the usual, we started on dinner. The scouts, eager to prove their wilderness skills, gathered firewood while I got the fire going. As the flames licked at the makeshift grill and the scent of roasting rabbit filled the air, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night. What the? I spun around, heart pounding. One of the youngest scouts, his face pale and contorted in terror, pointed a trembling finger towards the trees. Eyes. There were eyes. In the tree. My first reaction, stupid in hindsight, was to dismiss it. Good joke, kid. I barked, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Now get the hell out of there. Anthony, ever the calmer one, grabbed his flashlight and aimed it at the tree. For a split second, we saw it again. That same gray blur, vanishing into the shadows. A shiver ran down my spine. This was no joke. An hour later, after calming the terrified scouts and reassuring them falsely that it was probably just a raccoon, we finally got them settled into their tents. Anthony and I retreated to our own tent, the unease growing with every rustle of leaves and snap of a twig. I tried to lose myself in work, but the tension was thick enough to choke on. Then another scream. This time, multiple voices joined in a chorus of terror. I burst out of the tent, adrenaline surging. A group of scouts came hurtling towards us, their faces edged with fear. I followed their gaze and saw them, two glowing eyes, burning like embers in the darkness near the tent. We ushered the terrified kids into the main tent, trying to piece together what they saw. We're not sure, one stammered. It was a shape, big and gray. That was all we needed to hear. Anthony and I grabbed the largest kitchen knives we could find, our pathetic excuse for weapons, and crept towards the tents. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. And then we saw it. A hulking gray shape, larger than any man, crouched near the tents. What the fuck are you playing at? Anthony yelled, his voice cracking with a mixture of fear and rage. The creature turned. Its face, if you could call it that, was a grotesque mockery of human features. It let out an ear-splitting screech, a sound that seemed to claw at our very souls, before turning and fleeing into the woods. The next morning, we packed up camp and got the hell out of there. As we drove away, I caught one last glimpse of that gray blur at the edge of the trees, watching us. Whatever it was something out of a nightmare. Something that made me question my sanity. Something that I never want to see again. And to answer your question, no. I have no idea what that gray thing was, but I'll be having nightmares about it for the rest of my life.
Chickasaw National Park encounter. My true story. I was 20 years old. I had left home when I was 16 years old and decided to explore the world and see what I could find. I have been in Texas and Louisiana most of my life. I had been raised in Louisiana for the most part. I went from Missouri to New York, California, anywhere in the United States I could have decided to go. Finally, I decided to go home. Well, up until then, I had been staying in Oklahoma when I received a phone call from my mom saying that she might be dying from cancer. I came to find out later that she actually wasn't, she just wanted me home. I was hitchhiking through Oklahoma and was near the Chickasaw National Park. In 2 days, I hadn't been able to catch a ride. Sticking out my thumb doing all that and nobody stopped. So I said oh well and pitched a tent in the national park. I decided to explore some, and I followed the paved road until I got to the camping area. There was a fire pit off a little ways from the road, and it was a clear area. There were picnic tables, so I decided that's where I was going to camp that night. I decided to explore a little bit, and followed a deer trail into the woods. As I was walking, I looked to my left on the ground, and there was a hawk laying there with no head, as if it had been burned off. An eerie feeling came over me, but I just brushed it away as me being paranoid. I already had some paranormal experiences, but never came across one where it involved animals. So I walked away, and went back to the area that I had decided to pitch my tent that night. I sat there until it started getting dark, and I set my tent up. I left the tent flap open, because it was a very cool afternoon. Finally night came, the street lamps that were along the paved road came on. The lights were actually good enough to where I could actually read a book. At that time, I was reading in Rice, Queen of the Damned. As the time went on, I started to get sleepy. I reached up to zip up my tent flap, and looked over at the street light that was directly in front of my tent. Standing there directly under the street light was a creature as tall as the street light. Well, maybe not as tall, but maybe a couple inches directly underneath it. Its hair was very, very long, and it looked a little hunched. I couldn't see any eyes, because the hair seemed to be there in front of its face. It was all in black as far as I could tell, but what little skin seemed to stick out was as white as chalk, and what little bit of skin I could see was its hands, which clearly went past its knees. The hands were just hanging there, its nails were black. Very black, so dark it seemed to absorb the light. It just stood there, and it seemed as if the air surrounding it was vibrating. There was a type of static, it seemed, in the air. Now don't get me wrong, I was very startled and afraid. I didn't know what this was. Then suddenly underneath the hair, I could see light start to show, and it was as if the creature was smiling at me. It stood there for a very long time. Finally, as I was looking at it, something came over me. Now you may not believe me, you might say this story isn't true, but I know that it happened. I know that it happened to me. I grew angry. I grew very angry. I felt a rage inside me, and it grew very strong. I stared the creature down. I got out of my tent, stood up, and I looked straight at it and said, "I am not afraid of you. You have no power over me." It seemed to make the creature laugh, and all that did was make me even more angry. I stood my ground. I again told it, "I am not afraid of you. You have no power over me." I stood there staring at it for what seemed like the longest time. White-hot rage growing inside me, when all of a sudden I heard a loud snap behind me. I turned around quickly to find out what the noise was. There was nothing there, and then a thought suddenly occurred that thing's probably behind me now. I turned around quickly again, and looked towards the street light, and it was no longer there. I bundled up in my sleeping bag after it disappeared. That night as I slept, I had a horrible nightmare of the creature standing over me, laughing, with a toothy grin. The next morning I packed up my stuff, and looked towards the streetlight where the thing had been standing. There was blood on the street lamp pole. I no longer had that anger that I had felt. I was very scared. So I gathered up all my stuff, and got out of there as quickly as I could. I headed to the highway, stuck out my thumb, and thankfully someone picked me up. I have never been back to Chickasaw Park since that night. I never plan on going back there ever again. A word of warning, be careful where you camp. You never know what you might come across. You might not believe what I have written, but it did happen, and it happened to me. Thank you for taking the time to read this, and if anybody may know what the creature could have been, comments are very welcome. If anybody might know what it was that caused me to have the rage that I had felt come over me, that anger that I felt coming through, are definitely welcome. As soon as I get the chance, I will write some more of my experiences. Thank you.
Night shift at the old hotel. This is my first Reddit post. It may not be dramatic or particularly scary to some people, but I wanted to share this experience anyway. I recently got a job at a hotel downtown from where I live. I have never worked in the hotel industry before, so I had no idea what to expect. The time between applying for the job and being hired was less than 24 hours, which made me nervous, but I had been looking for several months and couldn't find anything, so I thought I'd take a chance. This hotel is about 150 years old and has plenty of character. Behind the front desk there are places where the wallpaper has torn away, revealing the psychedelic wallpaper from what I can only guess to be the 1970s. We're talking bright pink, neon green, hook-eye-induced vision type of wallpaper. The walls in the upper floors are painted bright orange and yellow, and the hallways are narrow enough to give off a shining kind of feel to it. But I'll elaborate on that later. My manager is a young Chinese man in his mid-20s, only 5 years older than me. The man who owns the building is also Chinese, and literally a walking stereotype. The owner is friendly and kind to the employees, but is also rich enough that he doesn't really care if the hotel isn't up to par. I learned recently that he also owns one of the more rundown shopping centers downtown. So this might explain the less than 5-star quality of the hotel. Probably about a 3.5 star, in my opinion. Some people describe the place as quaint, unique, full of character, while others describe it as outdated or disappointing. As a history enthusiast, I would agree that the place is full of character, but I also think the owner should be a little more concerned about keeping the place clean. There are lots of problems in this hotel, including mice, broken toilets, falling ceiling tiles, leaks, and other maintenance nightmares. The fancier rooms on the upper floors have real fireplaces in them, so that adds the risk of fires at the hand of careless guests. Mice are a common problem, and I'm thankful the guests don't have to see all the dusty traps filled with dead rodents in the basement. But by far, the most interesting aspect of the hotel is that it's supposed to be haunted. There are 2 ghosts that have been reported in the building, as well as the adjoining pub next door. Back when the hotel was first built, it had the reputation of being a complete dive. A lady now named Lady Churchill died in the hotel, and her spirit supposedly lingers in the haunted room 49. Guests will occasionally smell her perfume, or see her face in the mirror. One of the most frightening stories included someone opening the door only to have Lady Churchill fly at them in fury. On my first day, when my boss toured me around the hotel, he pointed out the haunted room to me. Lady Churchill has also been spotted at the fireplace in the pub arguing with her boyfriend, the other resident ghost, Brady. Brady was stabbed to death on a basement stairwell. That stairwell is not in use anymore, as it leads from the street directly into the basement. Instead, it's used to store extra chairs and miscellaneous items. The light is never turned on, which adds more of a creep factor. My shift is the day shift from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Every morning when I come in, I have to check the entire hotel by myself in search of homeless people sleeping in the back stairwell or trying to get in through the basement. I'm not an intimidating person. I'm a short female, not physically fit, and too friendly for my own good. If I did find someone hiding in the hotel, what was I supposed to do about it? I'm not sure which creeps me out more, the fact that I'm going around looking for people who shouldn't be there, or the idea that I have to walk through dark and silent areas known to be haunted all by myself. My sweep of the hotel includes all 4 floors of guest rooms, the kitchen, the back stairwell, the basement stairwell, and the basement. To give you some context, the back stairwell serves as a fire escape connecting all the floors together. It goes straight down to street level. It's always cold and echoey in there, and as I said before, full of dead mice. When I was first told about the haunted stairway, I mistakenly thought they meant the fire escape stairs, as they go down to basement level. The 4 floors for guest rooms in all their overlook hotel glory are shaped like a square horseshoe, which means more than enough blind corners where creepy twins might suddenly appear. Lady Churchill's haunted room is at the end of the hall around one of these blind corners, and yes, I do think about that every time I search the hotel. There is an elevator and an interior stairway, the one guests are supposed to use. Behind the elevator is this old connecting hallway that basically serves no purpose anymore. In the past, it may have been useful, but now it just serves as a secret passageway that goes behind the elevator and comes out at the other end of the horseshoe. This hallway especially needs to be searched for homeless people, drunks, or people having sex. The basement is by far the creepiest part of the hotel. To get there, you can either take the elevator or go through the pub and down the stairs. I prefer to go through the pub because there are some fascinating black and white photos from when the hotel was first built, and I love to look at them. It's also the best place to see the age of the brick foundation. Anyway, The basement is used for storing beer kegs, firewood, planter pots, housekeeping items and maintenance tools, among other things. It's usually deserted. Now that I know the dark, unused basement stairway is where Brady's spirit is supposed to be, I think I'll try to spend even less time down there. This week is my second week of work, and my boss has put me on the afternoon-evening shift, just so I can get a sense of what it's like in case I have to cover anybody in the future. Yesterday was my first late shift, and in that time I learned a whole bunch of things I didn't want to know from the lady I worked with. This woman, let's call her Peggy, has been at the hotel for 14 years. She's seen all there is to see and is well known for her stories. I've listened to some of these stories and honestly, part of me thinks she's full of shit. But the other part is going to cautiously believe her, on the off chance that it's true. Here are some things I learned about the hotel in the span of one shift. The man I'm replacing was not actually fired for chronic lateness, as my boss had told me, but instead for sexual harassment. The head of housekeeping, a man I get along with very well, is a friend of his. The day before, Peggy caught a drug addict rooting around in the private back office after hours. We looked over the security footage and he was definitely searching for something. We now keep the office doors locked. There were 2 guests several years ago who stayed at the hotel, and the next day they robbed a jewelry store downtown and fled back to the hotel with everything they'd stolen. There was a massive police standoff on the roof, SWAT teams and all. There's a news article about it online, otherwise I never would have believed it. The bedrock of the hotel can be found in the boiler room. There's a slight gap that has been filled in on the top right corner that connects directly to the street. One time Peggy came down to the boiler room to find a man half through the gap head first, trying to get in because he wanted to know what was down there. That image terrifies me. In the span of that one night shift, an alarm went off in the basement, the police showed up at the pub and a guest verbally abused the day staff over a non-existent shuttle to the hospital. No, not an ambulance, a shuttle. Taking the bus was beneath him, I suppose. And at my bus stop after my shift, a man was shooting up in public. My city has a drug epidemic going on right now. My bus took half an hour to arrive, and when I got off at my stop, it was as foggy as Silent Hill. I felt as though I should be looking around for Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees. It is October, after all. That's one night shift down. I have another tonight and one more the day after. If anything else interesting happens, I'll keep you folks updated. I mostly just wanted to get all this off my chest. It's amazing how different the hotel is after 3 p.m. Much louder, that's for sure, thanks to the pub on one side and bar on the other. Everyone I've gotten to know during my first week of work has already gone home, leaving me with drunks, strangers, and Peggy's crazy stories. One thing's for sure, after 3 nights of this, I'll never complain about getting up early again.
Please like, share, subscribe and leave a comment. All these things really help our channel to grow. If you have had a terrifying cryptid or paranormal encounter and would like to hear your story in one of our videos, please email us at the email on the screen or in the description. Have a great day or night wherever you are in the world. Your support means the world to us, more than you could ever know.